Well, hello there everyone. Here to show you the Jaycee Dugard creative workspace coloring activity right here. As you see right here is I would hand you right here is a picture right here, like a portrait right here of say of Jaycee Dugard, and then you have right here is like a desk right here for like say if this was like say is that like a workspace, you type that you type a location, and basically like talk about in the classroom, and talk about it's like a work desk, and if anybody were to think about like you were to manage your own stuff, if it's classrooms or if it's office related or anything like that, but talking about is like the part about for education though, and if most of us have seen from the previous coloring activities I did about young Teddy, and then on the other hand that like talking about like with all the other activities I worked at thoughts like for educations, and then for Mother's Best, but on the other hand that knowing about that with it's like talking about the whole part about it's like working right here is like the with the drawing right here, and way I drew the pine cone right there, and then to say with Jaycee, and knowing about that the whole purpose about this drawing right here is basically talking about right here working right here with about 7 related colors, and I'll be working right here and just put into some details right here. It's like with the I don't have too many updated pictures, but about what Jaycee Dugard looks like, but just by like say if I could go to it's like her for the Jace Foundation, you go to to the website, and then basically look up pictures from there, but just to add some details right here for the image for the photo right here, like for like so far as talk about a portrait, and basically though that usually that I usually go by is like drawing it, try drawing it freehand for what I see in the picture. And a lot of times that they from what I learned of course in class, so is that if you were to try to draw the picture, is to try to draw it looking from in the mirror, and a lot of times that trying to look at something in the mirror and then trying to draw it on paper, sometimes that could be pretty difficult to do as well. But on the other hand, that I'll be working right here, and anybody that may say that I'm like, yeah, crayons are for kids, that use other type of art supplies, and pretty much I have a few art supplies, but knowing about that paint that may get all over the place, etc., etc. But I have these pencils right here, variety of pencils, but talking about right here is that working right here with the crayon, and if it's going to be like a workspace, and basically that the purpose about this coloring activity right here, working right here is like variety of colors, similar to like a a red, like violet, type purple, type like if we call it like maybe a mixture, but like just to kind of give it like if I can remember right, then the images look like if for Jaycee Dugard, if she had like brown type hair, or like reddish type hair, but on the other hand, that I'm not trying to give like you say this portrait right here like a Britney Spears type look, but on the other hand that just to kind of give it like type of look to where that maybe that what she may look like, but talking about for the workspace, and talking about whenever if we were to be working on some source of education, and talking about that from the last video that I posted, and like talking about is like for like whenever we're in class, and then knowing about that for support one another, knowing about the things that maybe each one of us that don't understand, and then knowing about for when we raise our hand, especially in the class, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that somebody else, each person that maybe has their turn to go ahead and talk about something, etc., etc., and how people look at you, and then they kind of look at you like, well, okay, smarty, well, what do you got to say now, something like that, but I can tell anybody here that whenever I was in class, a lot of times that if they're talking about something that's related to something, and in a lot of ways that sometimes that whenever they look at you, like go ahead right here is like with the pine cone charm, like from what I usually see on most of the pictures of from Jaycee Dugard, but whenever people look at you, whenever you start talking about something, if it's going to be related to something that they're talking about in the classroom, or if it's going to be if it's going to be about a book, or if it's going to be about anything that's related to like maybe poetry or poem or proper nouns or anything like that. And knowing about that, anybody that if we're going to be in school that talking the types of things that we learn about and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that the teacher asks you to raise your hand and wait for your name to be called, for you to start, give you permission to speak, etc., etc. But a lot of ways, though, that we may wonder, though, that if we were to go to the library and talk about, any type of information knowing up between, if we go by saying it's like between yours, mine, and ours, and knowing about whenever we're in school, a lot of times that they ask you to where that you go ahead and do work a paper, you go ahead and talk about something related to about a story or a topic, and whenever, if we're going to be in school, we may have that type of situation to where some of the subjects that we really don't like at all, such as it could be language arts or math, reading, English, that type of stuff, and especially if it's anything related to maybe anything that's on the computer, and talking about the creative workspace, and basically it's like a desk, and I can tell anybody here now, based on from what I hear about in the book, I'm assuming that more likely that with Jaycee Dugard, and knowing about how she taught her kids, and knowing about for her young sister, and her, of course, the other family members that talking about that for ways for education, though, that if we come at that situation to where that if we were to be like be learning something, and then that we go on an internet site, and then we may come up to that situation to where subjects that we don't absolutely like at all, and knowing about, I'm like, is there any type of particular reason to why we don't like them? And I'm like, well, it's too hard, too confusing, but especially whenever they give you a test, whenever they test you, that a lot of times that you go by, say, study the notes, and then by the time you study real hard, and then take the exam afterwards, and it seems like everything's just so totally different. And a lot of times it like a way I would think about it, that if you tests that I've taken, if it's working on a driver's license or anything like that, or any type of test you have right here is like a work desk, and basically it's kind of like what we see right here is like a work desk, kind of like this. If we were in a classroom with about maybe 5 other people, and like with Jaycee Dugard, that for her you have like say only a 5th grade education of knowing about like for how the desks were lined up, if they were like for 2 other students that were facing the direction right here, and then knowing about how the classrooms looked like, of course, back then. But let's just say that if we were to be sitting at a desk right here, and then there would be like a book or a paper that we would be working on, and a lot of times, though, that we may see right here is that the user right here is a pencil, that if we were to put the date right here and then work in a paper, something like that, and then usually that they usually say that for most of the time, nearly 80-90% of the time that you're sitting at a desk, and then you're looking at these words, and then you're taking a test or doing something at the desk, and then it's like half the time if you were to get stuck on something, it's like you're trying to understand something, if it's anything related to the computer. But on your hand, and knowing about with the creative workspace is basically that whenever I was young, like growing up, like going home, and then working on my schoolwork, a lot of times I keep tell anybody that I'm like, yeah, that I wanted my own space. I wanted my own workspace. That whenever I got home, that I one way, the particular way that maybe I would like to do homework, and knowing about, I'm not the type of person who wants to look at a book. That they, a lot of times that they give you books and papers to take home with you, but then a lot of times it was not, nothing like, a real cool calculator or a real cool looking marker or anything like that. I'm like, anything that what we call cool. And I think about, yeah, cool. I'm like, Well, that is cool. Like, yeah, I could tell anybody here. I can go and write this down here, talking about with the word cool, and talk about with cool. Whenever we say cool, I'm like talking about, well, that's cool, cool. And whenever we say cool, I guess that usually means like a number of words such as fantastic. Or does that usually mean such as by words by saying it's like it's fantastic? I guess you could call it, fantastic. Fantastic. Amazing. I like to call it amazing. Or we may call it something such as awesome. Awesome. But you say with a W, but on your hand and knowing about it's like talking about if we were to be at a work desk right here, and then something that we were doing in school and in class it is. But I'll work right here with the pen right here. But basically, if most of us know what I'm talking about, that if we were to be doing any type of work it is, and that basically that especially if it's going to be online, that knowing about usually that this is kind of like what we see right here is if it's a test or if it's any type of paper, that if it's going to be like science related, if it's going to be science, and English, if it's going to be maybe English, that talk about studying about the pronouns, and like that the college courses, if it's going to be MLA writing style, or if it's going to be anything like that, or learning a new language, or learning a new typing skill, etc., etc. And so for this title, talking about for the creative workspace, is knowing about that one, that they say that go by the rule is that if you're going to be in school, though, that they say that you can't copy off of somebody else's work. You gotta have that work has to come from you, and a lot of times I keep thinking, and I can tell anybody that whenever I was in the third grade, if I can remember right, I cheated. I may have said it before, but I cheated once, and I'm like, I knew that if I were to try it again, and then maybe I would get caught too. But it's like, but on the other hand, knowing about, it's like talk about, say, for Jaycee Dugard and the creative workspaces, talking about this activity, talking about is like, for knowing about, how we want to manage our study, like so far is our educational skills, and the way I think about it with most of us, whenever we're in school, that sometimes that we may want to just go ahead and kind of get it done and over with, and to move on to the next semester, and go out and get a job, whichever it is, or maybe just for how we want to learn something. But on the hand, the type of work that they have you maybe doing is that if you were to be like, say, in a classroom, and some of the work is hard, and like knowing about if you're going to be in the classroom with somebody that could be maybe a brother or a sister, somebody that and then the teacher may give them credit for answering properly, or that this is the right answer, no, that's the wrong answer, and then and all about the whole purpose about if we were to try and go into that discussion and knowing about that if you come up to that situation to where that if we were in a classroom, and then there was somebody else that kind of made you like talking about that you were known as like what you call the one with that knew that more likely that if others in the classroom that looked at you, it's like what you call the expert a genius, somebody that knew a lot about what they were doing in class or something like that, and knowing about that they somebody else that maybe that want to get on like what's called like a high type skill, and knowing about that they want to start doing a little bit better than this other person, like somebody's like that your friends that know you better, as like talking about that you can actually solve problems, solve puzzles, and etc., etc., and then another person in class that kind of wants to get more credit for it or something like that, knowing about anything you can do, I can do better, etc., etc. But But the way I think about though, that really about, are we really in class really to talk about? It's like, you know, we're all different, and like in some particular way, but then we can all be the same. We can all get along in that particular way. But knowing about for how we do the work, and like the way I would think about though, that I'm sure maybe most of us could maybe agree that whenever we're in class and then we're working on an assignment and then we get a number of problems wrong, and somebody or we may come in that situation to where if we get a number of it wrong, and then you know, a number of students that say that, well, you're not doing it right, well, you know, this person's able to do this you know, work at, you know, with no problem, and you know, what's going on with you, like, and how come you can't, why is it so hard for you to, you know, pass this or something. But on the hand, that, you know, talking about right here with say Jaycee Dugard and like say the creative workspace, is that, you know, this activity is basically talking about, you got right here is the pinecone charm, and I'll go ahead and use right here is a little bit of like, you know, that like the peach type color right here, used right here, is that there would be like say I don't know if it's a, you know, the strap watch or something like that. They'll be about right here, but anyway, just going by the pictures, of course, that I have, but knowing about the creative workspace is basically that like a desk that if most of us be in school, that you may want to have a desk at home to where that you can use, you know, just to be able to concentrate more on your work. And like anybody that may say that, I'm like that, knowing about how much time I'm willing to spend on concentrating on the work. But if we were to be reading through the book of, like, talk about say Jaycee Dugard and the Stolen Life, and knowing about the types of things that we learn, and then knowing about like, you know, how she survived and stuff. But with this activity right here, talk about say for the creative workspace, is that knowing about for what we see whenever we're in class, and knowing about, you know, the stuff that which we call is like, you know, our own work. And I'll go and write this down right here for, you know, for our own work. And basically, is if that's really what it's all about, is that what the workspace is, knowing about, I'm like, you know, we may not have to be creative, but at least is to say like for the workspace, and basically that knowing about, you know, that I can go ahead and draw right here, like I'm like anybody probably say about at least if you want to go ahead and draw a picture of the moon. I'm like, yeah. Most coloring activities I have done, you know, that in color, like you know, that would involve maybe a little sketch, you know, say, of the moon. I'll go and draw here is that, you know, just like in charcoal, use right here is like a little sketch right here of the moon. And whenever we look at the sky at the time, like, what do we think about whenever we look at that? Whenever we look at the stars, whenever we look at the sky, you know, do we usually think about that, you know, the dream about space travel, or just knowing about just the looks, you know, like talking about for what we hear about maybe on the radio station about, you know, about the Google Map or something like that, Google Earth or something like that. It's like going to like, you know, for space images, you know, stuff like that. But on your hand, that knowing about you have right there is like a sketch right there of the moon, and then from there, and then goes by it's like a workspace, and where we can actually have control over about you know, what we you know, want to see, knowing about, you know, for like to have our own you know, personal, like have our own workspace to where we can actually, you know, concentrate and have our own supplies, and basically have our own space to where that, you know, if we want to go ahead and do something, and something to where that we can actually sit down at and be able to concentrate on our schoolwork. And I can tell anybody here that basically about the story about Jaycee Dugard is knowing about her education that may go only from the 5th grade, but the way I think about though is that with the, you know, the creative workspace is knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that you know, for the education that may go so far as some point, but then knowing about, you know, to work hard, you know, to knowing about, you know, the learning of for the new skills. But other than that, like I say for the Jaycee Dugard, you know, the creative workspace. talk about is like the creative workspaces. Talk about like if I were to have a desk right here, like sitting in front of a computer and basically be working on, it's like a lot of things that were related to office or work materials and stuff like that. Any type of study guides. But on your hand, at knowing about, for the most part, is that talking about like for the for educational skills, it is that knowing about the whole purpose about for it, like for our education that may go so far, and knowing about like for whenever we go to school and we learn to do a few things, and knowing about for what we remember, and then by the time we get home and knowing about like that a lot of the work studies we may have at home compared to whenever we go to school, stuff like that, and like anybody that may want to know and knowing about like that the types of like what you call for creative workspace, and knowing about like don't we think that we all deserve what you call is like our own workspace, and knowing about that for anything that we may learn about is knowing about to we say for a lot of the other writing and then the typing and then the drawing, if it's all done by each one of us, compared to like what you call is like knowing about from somebody else's work, and knowing about share it with somebody else, etc., etc. But the way I think about though, whenever I look at this bookmark right here, this bookmark right here may be taped together, or then it's not what you call, it's like pasted and then glued. It's like it's not store-bought either. It's like just this bookmark right here that anybody that may wonder though, that I'm like, how does that fit in the book? I'm like talking about if I were to open up the book right here of Jaycee Dugard, Still in Life, and if this was related to like a class assignment, and that knowing about how is it that's going to fit in the book, and if I were to be reading through the pages of talking about to the for the May 3rd of 1998, who am I? That is very moment, at this very moment that I don't know, I don't even know who I am, who I want to be, and do I know who I was, and then I was a kid who always wanted to be accepted, a part of the crowd, and then and a few other things like she loved horses, and would draw them for me, and talking about it's like for the best friend in Tahoe. But on your hand, and her name was Shani, I think Shawnee, or like who became my best friend in Tahoe. But on your hand, and knowing about that, you're talking about other things that mentioned in the book. But then if I were to say mark my place right here, and like talk about like that like how the bookmark goes around, knowing about like you have right here is like the parts of the book, and I don't know, I keep thinking about like if you were to check this book out maybe at the library, and knowing about like that you got right there as a bookmark, and no one's like like the bookmark, huh? Like, well, that you didn't check that out, did you? Like, no, I made this, so I'll go ahead and but on the end too, to knowing about like talking right here, let's say Jaycee Dugard, like talk about as a Still Alive, I'm talking say for the creative workspace. And knowing about is like what is like the workspace right here for creative workspace, and basically anybody that wants to have their own time for like to study about, they go ahead and they buy a book or something like that from the store, or check it out at the library, and just knowing about like a place to where that they can actually sit down and be like a to where that they can actually concentrate on their schoolwork, and a little bit understand a little bit about the topics about like talking about it's like homework, and talking about I'm like there's another type of way for what we call it's like for the creative workspace for like homework or anything like that. But that knowing about why is it that maybe that most of us would have what you call our own desk, and maybe our own calculators, or like talking about I'm like if you want to go ahead and create a bookmark, just to understand a little bit of the story, knowing about I'm like does the bookmark need to have at least maybe 6 or 7 pictures to know about like if it's based on a non-fiction or a fiction type book. And for the most part that they usually say that if it's going to be a librarian that may say that, well, bookmarks I guess are creative, but on your hand at knowing about I'm like that let's just say that with the bookmark that if it gets damaged, or lost, stolen, whichever. But on hand, and knowing about that. With a bookmark that I have right here, knowing about, if I call this, say that the creative workspace, and knowing about like where you're supposed to put it, I'm like, where you're supposed to put it whenever it's not in use, something like that. But I didn't talk about maybe a few markers and pens and stencil arts, that type of stuff. But knowing about if we were to actually pick a location to where if we want to sit down and read about a book, and knowing about exactly where it's going to be at, if a place where it's going to be quiet, or maybe your own space, and the way I would think about though that if maybe not everybody, but maybe a few people that readers that may say that if they have a place at home to where they can sit down and kind of study and read a little bit more about the story, and knowing about if that's what they like, or if they say that no, that they actually like reading it with somebody else, they actually like reading it with the group or something. But on the end too, to talk about is like with creative workspace, is knowing about, it's like for what you call for the word creative, knowing about, it's like to have your mind, feed your mind to the point where that you really want to kind of get your whole fact understanding about the story, and knowing about for what we picture in our mind. And if it's going to be what you call for, like say maybe for pronouns, for like for language, for any type of English, it's like English pronunciation, so far as who's, what, and where, that knowing about for how we use word processor, and then how we use the proper nouns you say in a sentence, though, that to say any type of word of English, and knowing about our education that may go so far, but knowing about how well we are willing to work to get to the further point, knowing about that if we want a higher education at some point, and knowing about that we may say though that we had something like what you call the creative workspace, is knowing about a place that we had our own time, knowing about with no hardly any distractions, to where you were able to concentrate on your schoolwork and be able to succeed, knowing about to make a good grade on for what you had to work on. And anybody that may wonder though that for some subjects that more likely that may be out there we probably don't like at all, but knowing about you may have some people in the classroom that may say something about something it is, and knowing about that you kind of want to speak up about something, and talking about like, hey, but on the hand, that knowing about that maybe one of the reasons to why that anybody that may say that whenever you're in class you may be real shy, it's like sensitive, and that knowing about that you're afraid to speak your own name, etc. But on the hand, that knowing about that really about ways to how to maybe make you feel a little bit more comfortable, knowing about if it's going to be somewhere such as maybe anywhere you go to, if it's going to be any type of places, groups or anything like that, wherever you're at, and then knowing about that other people that want to talk to you, and then knowing about you're around other people, and for how you interact with them. And I can tell anybody here that knowing about that really that if you really want your voice to be heard, and knowing about them that they never call your name, then more likely you can go ahead and talk to the person who's like who is in charge like of the meeting or something like that. And I can tell anybody here that the whole purpose about our education, if it's what you call the creative workspace, if we were to think about going writing the book or reading a book, any type of a mystery type novel, writing sentences or anything like that, books about say about our lives, or anything like that, any type of memoirs, that we may wonder though that I'm like really if it's all about our own thoughts, our own opinions, and knowing about for what we learned as well. And like anybody that may wonder though that I'm like that they start a book, and then if they start out with which is called, they did not start out using Microsoft Word or any programs like that. They start out with pencil and paper, notebook paper, something like that. But the way I would think about it with the workspace, though, with the creative workspace, is knowing about that. I usually say that talking about if I want to have my own workspace, maybe at home, and anybody that may wonder though that he had to keep it clean. I'm like up there at the school that they may not. They may tell you gotta keep it, but there may be some things that maybe that they take care of for you, that maybe that you may not be able to take care of all of it whenever you're at home or something like that. And a lot of things that we may have access to at home that we may say, though, that I'm like, yeah, that we're responsible for keeping it clean, organized, etc., but then up there at the school, that then that you may only be responsible for keeping it clean. And knowing about, maybe the teacher is going to be able to keep it organized a little for you, but we may have it to where that, talking about whenever we turn the age of 18, knowing about we're responsible for this, but whenever we turn the age of 12, and then trying to understanding about stories most of the time, is that whenever we're only 7 years old, and knowing about for that, getting in the habit of keeping our room clean, etc., and basically most parents will probably say about ways that help them keep them organized, keep them responsible for whatever they gotta do inside of the classroom, whichever you gotta concentrate on your work, especially that when it comes to homework. Talk about read chapters 1 through 3 and then write a paragraph about it. 1 through 3. I don't read books, but I think about it, I'm like, is there something a little bit more exciting so far as the creative workspaces, knowing about for our own work? But on the other hand, knowing about that, anybody that may say that, way I think about though, if you were to read something and then maybe get your idea, maybe 1 or 2 sentences, and then talking about that the whole story goes is that knowing about we may get our ideas about something whenever we read even further, and our education that may only go so far over the fact because that maybe that from over the years with technology changing and with websites changing, etc. But on your hand, and knowing about with our creative workspace, so is that if we had something like a creative workspace, is knowing about that, wouldn't we all want to be in charge for managing a website, such as if it's online, and knowing about who can look at this and who can look at that, and knowing about for what we learned and what we read about. And for many years, I kept wondering about that. Not everybody has time to look at everybody's stuff, but I kept thinking about, that person never took the time, of course, to read about me or read about my work, etc., unless if I had an online portfolio, an online site, to where that I'm like, if anybody were to read about me, then more likely they may say, hey, actually that I read about your research or something like that. But talk about if we call it the creative workspace, or we just kind of call it like we say out from the flow. But on the other hand, that knowing about that the whole part of us, like talk say for Jaycee Dugard, like software as the creative workspace, is knowing about that if we were to be doing our work, a lot of times the days you say is that you should not be cheating, you should not be copying off of somebody else's work. It's supposed to come from your own time, your own work. And I can tell anybody here, I cannot guarantee that all my work is going to be what you call exactly like, maybe like the book or the actual story. But on the hand to the way I'm talking about it is knowing about that, if we're going to be in classes like, to do what's right, knowing about is, to study hard, hope for the best, say for education, and talking about is like, to support one another, that type of stuff. And talking about is like for the creative workspace is talking about Jaycee Dugard, like talking say with the still alive, knowing about right here, talking about with the the creative workspace, that's in collectivity.